around with images. And so what you can do is, you know, if you want the focus to be the horses, then the man becomes a little bit smaller in the background.
To me, the same thing with the human body. It's a hard one to paint and draw. And to me, Michelangelo wins that. Yeah. And the rest of them, it's just, you know, it's just how you look at it.
Exactly.
How you see it.
Yeah. So Dujardin again, we just saw the Smith string the ox, but here you have a very different type of horse. And again, same Italian countryside with sort of beggars or peasants, it's kind of unclear what they are, but the horse here is a sort of work horse, and it's not the sort of noble, kind of noble horse that we've seen before, but this is a sort of work horse that it's used on a day-to-day life. And so there's kind of like different aspects. And it's been even said that Dujardin is here in a way making a parody of pictures like the Cowret, of these kind of wonderful horses in ideal landscapes, by showing that actually this, you know, there are horses in the countryside that are much less beautiful and grand. And in a way this becomes a very sort of heroic picture in a very different way, I find. And that's why it's fascinating. Let's go back to the side wall again.
Sorry.
Find your spot, Frank.
Thank you.
This one here is the only picture in the show that actually represents a specific place. And as I said, most of the others are probably, I mean, what these people would do, they would go out in the countryside, sketch hills. And, I mean, none of these pictures were painted, as we say, en plein air, outside. The idea of an artist going out with a canvas, the panel, painting stuff in front of the landscape is a 19th century idea. It's what the Impressionists did. No one before that did that. These things were done in a studio based on drawings. So people would go out, draw landscapes, trees, hills, whatever, and then reproduce them back in the studio. Now this would have happened exactly in this case. While all of the others are fantasy landscapes, I mean, what you could do, of course, when you have a whole bunch of sketches, is you put a hill there, then you put another hill you like next to it, then you put the tree that you spotted in some other forest there, and you construct a landscape which is made up. This instead is representing a very specific place. This is Herman von Svaneveld, who again is another Dutch artist who lived in Rome in the early, well, the first half of the 1600s. And he was, again, one of the ones that was more clued in with what was going on around him. Again, Svaneveld, like Both, is another one that paints landscapes for the Buen Retiro, for the King of Spain. He was also Claude Lorrain's flatmate for a while. The two lived together and painted landscapes together. This represents a very famous spot in Rome as part of the ruins. What you see over there are part of the ruins of a temple, which is actually the beginning of the Roman Forum. Beyond that, you have the Roman Forum. This is the Arch of Constantine. And it's represented, as it was then, overgrown with plants, with buildings attached to it. I mean, when you go and see it today, it's perfectly isolated, clean. I mean, ruins today are presented as kind of historical monuments that are preserved and looked after. At the time, they were just ruins. There were things that were falling down. And in fact, you notice that one of the columns there is missing. That was only restored later on. And that all these sort of weird medieval buildings were then attached to it. What you get to see here as well is wonderful everyday life figures again, but from different groups of society. So most of these are noble people. You get a sort of wonderful group of kind of knights, kind of well-dressed aristocrats, pointing to the ruins. You get a Roman lady with her maid and probably her son next to it. You get pilgrims over here, another lady there and a man bowing with a dog. But then the best bit is the group of artists there sketching. And it's kind of like, so you get this idea of what these Dutch people would have been doing. They would have been sitting there in the middle of all the stuff going on, sketching things like the Arch of Constantine. And my favorite thing about this picture is the most famous building in Rome, which is there, but you don't see it. And that arch there is one of the arches of the Colosseum. So this is painted from underneath the Colosseum looking out. So it's this kind of, again, suggestion of, you know, the most famous building in Rome is kind of there, but not quite. And so they're focusing on a different area of the city.
I'm noticing throughout all the pictures in the exhibit that the men and the women, even though these may be painted in Italy or painted in Holland, they're all dressed as Dutch. I've noticed that they all have Dutch clothing on.
Not all of them. Not all of them.
Pretty-
I mean, the
pretty-
ones
they're
we've
pretty
seen,
close.
yeah. I mean, most of them are, because obviously, again, the market would have been a Dutch one. In this case, this is all pretty much Italian fashion. But this, is, for example, is a picture that's signed and dated. And when you look at it, you think, well, of course, this was done in Rome. But we know that it wasn't. This was actually painted in Paris. By 1645, Svanevelt lived in Paris. So, I mean, much more cosmopolitan group of people than one would imagine. But again, based on drawings. I mean, what he did, you know, people would stack up drawings and then bring them on their travels with them and then use them. And so in Paris, Svanevelt is still painting Rome. And it looks as if he's just there, I mean, in front of the thing. But obviously, he's in an altogether different country.
Is he part of the second generation?
Yeah,
So he did travel the
yeah,
world.
he was in Rome, yeah.
How long did he stay there?
He was there for about 10 years.
Oh, wow.
So quite a long time. Svanevelt was there for quite a long time.
So
And then moved to Paris and then eventually died in Paris. He's one of the ones that doesn't return to Holland. He actually moves to Paris and then dies in Paris.
But many of these painters did go live there and then they lived for quite a long time.
Berkham is one of the ones that probably went back several times. I mean, some of them went, then returned to Holland, then went back to Rome. Most of them went for a few years and then returned to Holland, and that was it.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Are you saying that the medieval buildings that are attached there are
Yeah.
gone now?
Yeah.
They've been, and so all the
Yeah.
greenery is,
Yeah, all the greenery is
Been a long
gone
time
at
since
night.
I've
Yeah,
been
no, absolutely.
So
That's
it's all gone?
Yeah, that's all gone.
it's just the structure?
No, no.
People standing on
Detail of the sort of warm light coming from behind the bridge, and if you look at the little dog looking into the light, this is an absolutely lovely picture, and this has actually been for a long time the cover of our general collection catalogue, and we've used it. It's such a sort of beautiful, beautiful painting. And then the very large landscape with huntsmen, which again is in an Italianate style, but with hot Dutch trees from Holland, and this sort of scene of this kind of huntsman with dogs and their prey. But the most interesting thing about this is the leaves in the background, sorry, in the foreground, which are bright blue, and there's this very strange effect of the blue leaves. And this is one of the key examples of how a picture can change. And when we look at pictures, we always expect them to be exactly like when they were painted. And when pictures are restored, people always say, oh, it's back to the way it was when it was first painted. Of course, nothing is ever back to the way it was first painted. I mean, these things are 300-400 years old. You know, something that's 400 years old changes over time. And one of the things that always changes, and we don't know how much more it will change in the future, is how oil dries. And oil takes an incredibly long time to dry. And in drying, pigments change and change color. Some other pigments fade with light. So it's a lot of stuff that we're learning now through technical analysis. But there are specific reds that turn pink over time. And these sort of artists use what is now known as a fugitive color. A fugitive color is a color that goes. And of course, as I mentioned earlier on, you wouldn't just go to a shop and buy tubes of paint. You had to make your own pigment. And to do that, of course, if you wanted to have green, you had to mix up blue and yellow. And you mix different types of blues and yellows depending on the type of green you wanted. So as you can see, I mean, a lot of the greens in this picture are still green. Some of the greens tend to go sort of browner, and you wonder if some of these brown colors were originally meant to be more vibrant. But a very specific type of yellow they use goes all together. So when you're left with a blue, it means that the yellow's gone. I mean, those leaves were always meant to be blue, they were always meant to be green, sorry. And of course, the weird blue effect is just the fact that the yellow's gone. And as you go through, you will see other greens that have turned into browns, and there's always this discussion of, you know, wonderful sort of autumn landscapes. And, you know, this effect of sort of autumn or fall, it's not something that was always meant to be there. I mean, sometimes these pictures were green and then turned brown. So, again, something worth keeping in mind.
This is a very fascinating scene here. Do you know, with this type of hunting, would this have been done by the dogs?
Yeah.
The dogs would have actually
Right.
gotten the deer.
And that both in Italy and in Holland, probably, with hounds, yeah. Absolutely.
Very fast.
Yeah. Yeah. A group of these artists also developed what we know as a capriccio, a sort of made-up scene, where again, if you remember, I was mentioning the fact of taking sketches and doing drawings and then, you know, mixing all of this up together. And Lingelbach is one of the ones that, I mean, he's born originally in Germany and then moves to Holland. and he decides to come up with grander scenes in a more classical style. And so this, again, we don't know what